Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Bullion. Our guest today is Trita Parsi. Trita is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute. Trita, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you on. This is your first time on Wall Street Bullion. So before we start and getting into all the geopolitical craziness in the world, talk a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into this space?
Oh man, that's a long story. I've been in this space now for 25 plus years. I grew up in Sweden. My family is originally from Iran. We fled right before the revolution, and then I ended up coming to the U.S. to do my PhD in international relations. I'd focused on Israeli-Iranian relations, which was something that no one paid attention to at the time when I wrote it, but I kind of had a hunch that it was going to be the next big conflict in the region. So by 2007, when my book came out on it, it was the first book in more than 25 years that had been written on the topic. And I think it gave me a larger platform than I otherwise would have had. I was the head of the National Iranian American Council at the time as well, an organization that I helped co-found that was an organization for Iranian Americans in the United States. And for the last, what is it now, 5, 6 years, I've been the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute, which is a restraint-oriented think tank in DC, which I also helped co-found.
So that's incredible. That's an incredible past. And what are your thoughts right now on the Israel-Iran conflict? Do you think it will restart again, or do you think it is all calmed down for now?
No, I don't think he has calmed down. I think this is behind this, underneath the surface. Both sides are preparing themselves for the next round. I do suspect that the Israelis will start it relatively soonish. I think the window for them to restart the war probably starts to close sometime in December. Doesn't close entirely, but once the U.S. is in its midterm election season, I think it's going to be more complicated calculation for the Israelis because the U.S. element of this equation is so crucial. And the reason I think they're going to restart it is because one of the critical objectives they had with starting the war, which was to turn Iran into the next Syria or Lebanon, a country that Israel can bomb at will with impunity and without US involvement, was not achieved. And I don't think the Israelis thought that it was going to be achieved in the first round, but I think that they thought that they're going to be able to get further ahead than they did. But once they started it, they can't stop because if they give the Iranians too much time, they will rebuild their air defense systems, potentially root out the Mossad presence inside the country, perhaps buy better air defense systems. And reality is that they build missiles faster than the US and Israel can build missile interceptors, which means that if you give the Iranians too much time, the Israelis will most likely will be at a disadvantage on one of the most crucial sides of this equation, which is the effectiveness of Iran's missiles that really wreaked havoc in Israel. So because of that, I think the Israelis are likely to start a war relatively soon.
Hello, my silver and gold bugs. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching the video. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. Back to the video. How is that possible that you have Israel, of course, backed by America? America has the most advanced military in the world, from what people say. And how does Iran make missiles faster than the Israelis and Americans? How is that possible?
Well, you have to keep in mind, the technology for a missile interceptor is vastly more complicated than the technology for building a missile. Now, I'm not saying that missiles are simple. I mean, it's rocket science at the end of the day. But when you're building a missile interceptor, you're essentially trying to hit a bullet with another bullet.
Wow.
That is an unbelievable technology at the end of the day. So the mere fact that, there is even that technology and that has, quite an extensive success rate is in and of itself astonishing. Now, of course, I'm not an expert on the specifics of it, but much of it depends on, if the missile is shot, is it a missile that essentially has one single trajectory, or is it a missile that can change its trajectory? If you have that, then suddenly it becomes much, much more complicated. And the Iranians have missiles that are of that more advanced stage. They have missiles that are hypersonic, which means that they move at a speed that is very difficult to be able to hit. And we saw that towards the end of that 12-day war. At one point, I think 58% of the missiles that the Iranians shot actually hit their targets and could not be stopped by the Israelis. And that is despite the fact that Israel has, I mean, that airspace is the most protected airspace in the world. It has the Arrow 1, 2, 3 system. It has the Patriots. It has the Iron Dome. And on top of David Sling, and on top of that, the Israelis begged the United States to put THAAD batteries in Israel as well, which is the most advanced anti-missile system that the US has. Despite all of this, they took a large number of hits. The number exactly is unknown because the Israelis have military censorship. They don't allow for this information to be reported. And the numbers that you hear reported are most likely a vast undercount because it's based on what the Israelis have allowed to be discussed rather than actually, a complete picture. And again, this is not unusual. I'm sure the Iranians would hold a tremendous amount of information as well. But it does mean that, what you're hearing in the media is part, I think, of a larger narrative to try to portray the Israelis as if this was a huge success for them. And that's very important because from their standpoint, to be able to continue to get the support of the United States, they need to portray themselves as having been successful. This is part of the reason why the strike on Qatar is creating such troubles for them because it was a failure. And Trump doesn't like to associate himself with a failure.
How can a lot of people now are in the Gulf region are starting to band together after what happened with Israel and Qatar. Why would Israel do this? Do they just want to nuke any peace talks? And why would they want to nuke any peace talks?
Yeah, I mean, the Netanyahu government doesn't want to have peace. It wants to continue this war, despite the fact that there are no real military objectives left, according to the IDF. And a very key reason for this, from his standpoint, is the fact that if the war ends at some point soon thereafter, his coalition government will collapse, which means that there will be new elections. If he loses those elections, he loses the immunity that he currently has as prime minister. And there are
Oh,
already extensive legal action against him for corruption and many other things. There's a prison sentence awaiting Netanyahu once this war is over and he's no longer prime minister. So he's
wow.
been keeping it alive. His right-wing coalition wants to keep the war alive because their objective is not just Gaza, their objective is to annex the entire Palestinian territories and establish what they call Eretz Israel, which is Greater Israel, which actually is not just that. I mean, they're having claims on other parts of the Middle East as well. And we've already seen how they have taken more Syrian territory. The war in Gaza needs to continue for that. It brings all attention to Gaza, whereas in reality, the Israelis are actually de facto annexing, continuing to de facto annex large parts of Palestinian territory in the West Bank as well.
Now they're pushing very hard for Iran not to have nuclear weapons. How fast do you think Iran can develop a nuclear bomb just to use it as a defense or a deterrence against Israel? Or do you think they already have one in secret?
So, on the latter question, I don't think they do. If they did, just like with the case of Iraq, Israel and the United States would never attack. The United States and Israel does not attack a country that does have nuclear weapons. On the first question, though, we frankly don't know really at this point because the damage that the US bombing did to Iran's nuclear infrastructure is extensive, but we don't know some key things, such as the Iranians had a stockpile of 60% enriched uranium. That uranium can be turned into a nuclear weapon. Actually, would probably serve them, if all of it is intact, they could probably get 9 to 10 nuclear weapons out of that. But we don't know if that was destroyed. We don't know if all of it was in Fordo, this underground facility, or if some of it had been moved. And as a result, it's very difficult to predict, how fast they would be able to do it. We do know that prior to the bombing, if the Iranians had decided to build a nuclear weapon and they were to enrich their 60% enriched uranium up to 90%, which is what you need to have for weapons grade uranium, it would take them no more than 3 to 7 days. That does not mean that they would have a weapon in 3 to 7 days.
Okay.
In fact, after that, there's several other steps you need to take, and the Iranians haven't taken those steps. We don't even know if they have the knowledge to do so. And you have to test the bomb, you have to put on a missile, so it still would probably take another 2 to 3 years, according to most estimates. Now, a couple of things here. There's an argument that says that the bombing of Fordo by Trump set back the program 2 to 3 years. Perhaps it did, but it set back that program 2 to 3 years, which was a civilian program that actually needs a very large number of centrifuges. And the Iranians had roughly 19 to 20,000 centrifuges operating. To build that back up may take 2 to 3 years. But if they actually decide to go for a nuclear weapon, you don't need that many centrifuges for that. In fact, the Brits built their first nuclear weapon with about 20 centrifuges.
Okay.
So you could do that in a basement somewhere, much, much more difficult to detect than this large civilian program that was destroyed or set back. So I think it's important to make sure that apples and oranges are not compared here. Even if the civilian program was set back 2 to 3 years, if the Iranians decide to go for a weapons program, it may actually take them far less time to be able to do so. And again, it all depends on whether the 60% enriched uranium was kept intact or not. What I think we do know now, based on reporting that came out in Israel this week, is that the Israelis lied and that the Trump administration further repeated that lie, which was the Israelis said that they attacked because Iran was just weeks away from building a nuclear weapon. According to the notes of the internal cabinet meetings, Netanyahu said that if they don't attack now, in years, Iran could have a nuclear weapon. In
Hmm.
public, Netanyahu and the Trump administration repeated that, said that the Iranians were weeks away from a nuclear weapon. But the transcript of the cabinet meeting shows that he was talking about years, not weeks. That's
Wow.
not a that's not a mistake. That's a deliberate misinformation that was given publicly in order to justify what at the end of the day was a war of aggression.
Welcome to the Cayman Islands, a premier offshore jurisdiction where natural beauty meets financial stability. Here, your wealth is more than secure. It thrives in one of the most trusted and respected financial centers in the world. For over a decade, SWP has been the trusted choice for precious metal investors worldwide. Our purpose-built 6,000 square foot facility sets a new standard in precious metals storage. We are proud to be one of the only vault operators approved by the London Bullion Market Association. Beyond safeguarding your assets, we're committed to making a difference in our community by supporting local causes and events that reflect our values. As we continue to expand and innovate our services, we ensure that your wealth is safe and strategically positioned to shield you from the uncertainties that lie ahead. Strategic wealth preservation, trusted today and ready for tomorrow.
Wow. Wow. It's pretty crazy, Trita. What's gonna I feel like it'll intensify what's happening in the Middle East. I guess it's just a matter of time before, something else breaks out. I feel like the next phase between Iran and Israel will be a lot greater than what we've recently seen. Um, do you think that, like, like, let's say we put ourselves in Iran's shoes, why, if they know that Israel and America won't invade if they have a nuclear bomb, why don't they just go ahead and make one?
Well, there's several different reasons. First of all, again, we don't know exactly what they have, and if it is so that they're too far away from it and they were
Right.
to start building a bomb, they may actually put themselves at even greater risk, not just of the Israelis attacking, but the United States itself. And it's very clear the Iranians do not want to have a direct confrontation with Israel with the United States to the extent that they can avoid it. I mean, the US is so overwhelmingly powerful.
Right.
But I think there's also a deeper issue here, which is that if the Iranians actually wanted a nuclear weapon, they could have built it by now. The Pakistanis went from zero to a nuclear weapon in 9.5 years. The Iranians have had a nuclear program since 1968. We have to answer the question, if they really want a nuclear weapon,
They would have done
why
it.
don't they have why don't
Yeah.
they have one?
Right.
And I think the reason for it is because Iran's strategic and geopolitical calculation is very different from that of Pakistan. At least it was. We don't know where it is right now. Pakistan was sitting next to India. a massive country, deep conflict between the two states. And as a smaller country, there was a strategic benefit from having nuclear weapons, particularly if the Indians have nuclear weapons. And the Indians tested their bomb in 1974, and that spurred the Pakistanis to follow suit. If you're Iran and you take a look at the map, Iran is a giant in the Middle East, both territorial size as well as population. And if they get their act straight economically, they can be a giant as well, and they were before. If they were to build a nuclear wall and others follow suit, then tiny Bahrain, which is not even a 20th of Iran's size, could potentially build a nuclear bomb.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then Iran would lose its conventional strategic advantage by being so much larger, because once both countries have nuclear weapons, they're essentially at parity. Both of them can destroy the other.
Right.
Whereas if it's only left to conventional weapons, Iran has a huge strategic benefit. This is
No.
part of the reason why two of the region's largest countries in 1973 pushed for an initiative called the Nuclear Free Zone in the Middle East. This was 1973, Egypt and Iran, two of the countries that would lose so much of their strategic conventional advantage if the region nuclearized. Israel is in a completely different situation. It is surrounded by enemies to a certain extent because of its own actions. But also, it is a very small state with no strategic depth. Its calculation is going to be very different from that of Iran. So the Israelis do have nuclear weapons, of course, although they deny it. But that's the point. There is this simplistic approach in Washington, which is that, oh, why wouldn't the Iranians want the bomb? And thinking that they're going to be in the same boat at the Pakistanis, who at one point said, it doesn't matter, we will eat grass, but we will have a nuclear weapon. The Iranian calculation has been very different, but the United States has pursued a policy based on the assumption that Iran's calculation is the same as the Pakistani. And I think that has been a huge mistake.
Wow. Well, Trita, it's such a pleasure having you on to speak about all these deeper issues happening in the Middle East and, of course, around the world. I want to thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. This is your first time. Hopefully it's not your last because I'd love to talk to you soon as
Love to
everything
come back.
develops. Awesome. Talk to you soon, Trita.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.